Welcome to episode 67 of the Necronoma.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and I'm my own number one fan, which means I have to subject myself to a lot of pain.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast, and I don't want a number one fan after I saw this movie back in the 90s.
And I am S.A. Bradley. I am also an author. I am a podcaster for the Hellbent for Horror podcast, a public speaker, and I have a love-hate relationship with my fans. No, I'm just trying to put something in there for the misery piece.
Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? I've read your book. You've been on the show before and talked about it a little bit, but maybe people haven't checked that one out. So tell us all about yourself, man.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me back on. And my book is called Streaming for Pleasure, How Horror Makes You Happy and Healthy. And it's a love letter to all things that go bump in the night. And it really talks about how horror not only reinvents itself to reflect each generation's anxieties, but it can also be healing as well as thrilling. And I love that Jungian side of horror, the idea of the shadow self, where we want to have a nice, safe, friendly handshake with our shadows, which all of us have. And we do that in a way that can relieve some of the tension of just being in, a world where we can't get a haircut and we're stuck in our houses for 6 months and all sorts of stuff. And I'm in Northern California, so the skies are on fire and there's heat waves and, all sorts of craziness. And horror movies can take me somewhere where I would love to go as opposed to where I am. And I'm also with podcast Hellbent for Horror. It's a podcast about everything that's related to horror. And I like to talk about horror as art and social commentary. I talk about movies and books and stories and music, all of that which has shaped me, and how those things shape horror itself as a film style, as an art form, because I think that horror is one of the most diverse and beautiful storytelling styles that we have. And I love getting into the debate with people who say that they're not horror fans. I like to say certain movies are not horror, and I like to remind them that they used to love horror and they secretly still do. They're just defining it in a very stringent way, and this movie would be one that would probably be Misery, that is, being one that would not fall into the lines of horror for a lot of people.
And that blows my mind. Like, maybe it's because I'm a writer, but Misery terrifies the shit out of me. Mm-hmm. But it's not even about writing. It's not about your fans stalking you down or any of that kind of stuff. It's literally like, what the fuck would you do if you woke up, you're nowhere near anything, you don't know where you are, and somebody's doing this to you, and they seem to know everything about you, and you don't know shit about them? That's fucking horror,
Yes, I agree. And it's interesting. I can't wait till we really dig into Misery and where we go with it, because Misery was one of my favorite novels of Stephen King before I was even writing. I mean, at the time that Misery came out, I think I was in New England in the Air Force. I was a crash firefighter at the time, and I was reading everything that King was coming out with at that point. And Misery was one of those that stuck with me, because I think he's better when he limits himself. If I may talk very grandly or generally about Mr. King, but I think his best books are when it's two people stuck in a car and there's a rabid dog. Someone's handcuffed to a bed. Someone is in a bed and their favorite fan is right there. When he limits himself, he really gets into the characters. And I think the thing that really works with King the best, and why many of his movies or his books don't translate into great films, is because the thing that makes King's stories are these internal dialogues that happen with characters. You get to really see a nastiness or a frailty, all of that, which is very, very hard to translate into a film. And I would say that Misery is one that suffers from that a lot, because of where Misery was able to go as a novel versus where it was as a movie in one set. But I think this is one of the books that, for King, was really, really strong. And one of the few that he did where I think he kind of pulls back the mask of trying to not do the Hitchcock everyman or every kid getting into trouble. This is him talking about him. And The Dark Half was another that he did this with. And it was interesting that he's had 2 books about being a known person and how being a known person is a curse and a gift, and having to wrestle with that. And this is also, I think, after he's gone through cocaine, like a heavy cocaine time. He may just be coming down off of it. He's done with alcohol, I think, at this point. And so he's still in the soul-searching part of that. And you can feel in the book that he's coming to terms with some serious issues and resentments and anger within himself about the very thing, biting the hand that feeds, having that hand hurt you. And what I love about Misery is that, is it about fans? Is it about writers? It's about obsessions. It's about addictions. And the book really goes into that so magnificently. And the movie hits on it and is very entertaining. But it interests me that if we were talking about horror between the book and the movie is more of a thriller than it is a horror book, because the book is so horrific. I think before we started the show, we were talking about Lovecraft Country, and I was saying how the first 2 episodes already did everything I expected the show to do, coming sight unseen. And so I'm like, where the fuck is this going to go? And that's what it was like reading the book Misery. In the first 80 pages of Misery, everything that I thought was going to happen had happened. The timer of, she's going to read this book, and he knows that the character's killed, but she doesn't. There's the timer. There's the bomb under the table. That's going to be when she's going to lose her mind, and then there's going to be. Well, I thought that was going to be at the end of the book. I had no idea that it was going to go into this really, really, really juicy thing about how much we need each other, the audience and the performer, and how we're addicted to each other in a way that is almost loving, in a very sick love affair kind of way. And so anyway, that's my first volley.
No, I love that. Not to cut Don off, but I just want to say one thing really fast. I think that my one complaint with all of Misery is that Paul Sheldon doesn't seem to have a place where he's the audience. And that's the only thing missing to me, because for us as writers, we're also always the audience. Like Scott, I know you're a huge fan of Grady Hendrix, we always have those certain people that we have to consume anything they make, right? Like mine's Joe Hill. Yeah. I'm joking, in case you're listening, Mr. King. I joke that the best thing Stephen King ever made was Joe Hill. And, but that's my thing. Like, Joe Hill just speaks to me, right? And so I'm always audience there. But then I get that flip side of where I have an audience. And I just wish that Paul Sheldon had anything, even if it was a TV show and he wanted to know the ending of something, or I feel like it's this one little thing that's missing that would make me like him more. And it's not a big complaint at all. It's just, I really feel they could have done more subtext with that by showing that he's the audience somewhere as well.
Yeah, he's Sam and Dave. That's the only thing that we know that he really likes, listening to Shotgun in the song or in the film. I don't want to counter without hearing from Don. Don, yes. What do you want to say on that?
Well, I would say that I think I messaged James about this because it's been a couple of years since I've seen Misery. It's one of those movies that when it's on, I'm going to watch it. And the first time I watched it, the most horrific scene, of course, is the sledgehammer scene for me. I mean, for the physical pain, because I've had injuries to different parts of my body, and I will tell you right now, ankle injuries, and then seeing the way that his foot moves, it made me nauseous. Yeah. And it still has that moment where my wife and I were watching last night. I was like, I can't watch, and I looked and I was like, oh shit, it wasn't that bad. But the movie itself ages very well. Oh yeah. And in all honesty, you could have done this movie today. And I think what the subtext would have been about, or the metaphor would have been about, would have been with toxic fandoms. You know,
Yeah.
you could throw George Lucas into this, and it's some rabid Star Wars fan. I mean, not that they exist. Some rabid Star Wars fan who tells them like, "You fucked this up, and I can't believe you made Jar Jar Binks." And then apparently, like the next week, they kidnap J.J. Abrams and have the same complaints. But it's that idea of the consumers of the product feel as though they have ownership of the product, or whatever the story is, which they do in their own mind as far as what it means to them, how they feel about the story, what the angles that they feel it should have gone in. But the person who creates it is the one who gets to control all of it. And I think one of the scary parts of the film, of course, we'll come back to it, is the idea that this number one fan doesn't like that Paul has changed too much of the story, or didn't end the way that she wanted it to. And when he rewrites it, she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is exactly the way I thought it was supposed to go. Oh my God." Everything. Right. He starts to figure out what she needs to hear and writes it to suit her, as opposed to, "Oh, well, she's got some real ideas." Mind you, he's chained to a bed or confined to a bed. But I think this would definitely work with respect to not literally tying somebody up, but the way that social media may affect a lot of stars, writers, creators, to where they don't have that freedom from illegitimate criticism. You should always have legitimate criticism, but if it's one of those things of, "I didn't like this character because they gave her purple hair. Oh, I didn't like the fact that a woman was flying this spaceship." That's not a legitimate criticism. I can't believe, Star Trek it has all these social justice messages in it. And it's that understanding, like, you obviously missed the point of what this is. Now, people who are linked to that, who are creating that, just can feel a little bit, beaten down. And I guess they become hobbled because there are people that are part of that fandom that all of a sudden make this argument that whatever you have created as part of this is not canon because it doesn't fit into what they feel it should fit within the story.
Oh, it drives me crazy. I'm glad that you brought up Lucas and all of that around Star Wars, because I'm an original Star Wars kid. I was 10 years old, or it was 11, when Star Wars came out. I saw it with my dad and my sister, and we went to the theater, and I was in the aisles running around like a TIE fighter because I was so excited. And I'm the one who doesn't understand the canon, right? Because I didn't watch the cartoons. I was stuck watching cinema, folks. I was watching the 3 fucking movies as they came out. And it blows my mind that there's this kind of thing. And I was just watching last night. One of the things I've been doing for the pandemic is my next door neighbors come over with their kids, and we sit in the driveway, and I put Star Wars movies up on my garage. And so we've been watching them in sequence, and we just finished The Rise of Skywalker, the last one. Mm-hmm. And partway through it, I was like gritting my teeth going, I can't believe how much this is an apology. Rose, was it Rose? Is that the character? The one that was everybody hated from Last Jedi?
Oh, yeah. Well, fanboys hated her, apparently.
Yes, but fanboys hated her. And all of a sudden, she is relegated to being a secretary in the last film. They even asked her, "Hey, you want to go on the Great Big Adventure?" She goes, "Nah, I do better here looking at data, and I'll see if I can find, it's real important that I find the problem." It's like, here, hold this. This match is super important. Go in the corner and guard this match while we go play Rock and Roll Stars out in the woods. It's just, it was such a horseshit moment. And I went, this is them, J.J. Abrams and everybody's caving to this onslaught of people who somehow we started to believe that it was the right behavior to say, I pay your salary, in whatever it is, to officers or to waiters or to whatever it is. And it's always about us being entertained, right? And it's like, I pay your salary. And that used to be, boy, what a douche. That guy's a dick. And now that's how we run things. Now we get we have this thing where we force the artists into doing this fucking weird dance for us. And I felt that's one of the things that I wanted to talk a lot about was the subtext that's there in Misery of how the addiction works. And so I thought that Paul Sheldon is on the bed. He knows he's got to get her completely hooked. He's got to give her a main line and try and get her where she's not going to think correctly. So he's basically taking everything that he has heard in a line, signing his books, that he's heard a million times over, the fan theories, that he's just smiled and nodded, and he goes, it's going in this one. This is the one. This is kitchen sink. I've got to make her royalty. I've got to have, this thing where she's going to get married, all that stuff. When he's sitting there saying, everybody wanted to know who her father was. It's in here. It's right here. It's written. You're not seeing it. Was brilliant because I basically felt that what he was doing was saying, here we go. This is the stuff that people have been wanting all this time. He's not writing. He's placating. And yet it's the stuff that the audience would want, these fan theories and stuff. He put them all in to his book. And I mean, Game of Thrones would be a great example, where the show supersedes the books, because Martin is that slow. They could have 8 seasons and he wouldn't get the next book out. But now his books are almost like immaterial to a huge group of people. Whatever his theories are, those theories have already been superseded by fan theories. They may have been agreed upon by him, but fan theories have taken over. So I love that that's how he works his spell at the end to get her out of her game by giving her everything, just saying, here it is. You wanted it uncut? Here it is uncut. And hopefully you don't die. Well, maybe you will. I'm really hoping you do. But here's the whole deal. And I think that's really interesting. I think that's very much an issue that there is with toxic fandom right now, and how people like you folks, myself, other people that are running podcasts and are on social media are constantly having to say, stop saying that horror movies are political now. They've always been political. They're just not your politics anymore, motherfucker. You have been eclipsed. You're in the background now. Sorry, don't know what happened. We didn't do it to you. But somehow you went from being able to understand the politics or having it bounce off of you relatively easily because it was no longer relevant to you at the moment. But now that it's at the moment politics, you're all over it. You're noticing it. You're feeling it. If you're not feeling good about it, maybe that's the point of having those political moments in there, so that you're really taking a look at what's going on, as opposed to saying, well, movies it's just about a guy peeping in a window and seeing somebody get murdered. Oh, is that what it's all about? Okay, I got you. Yeah, that's all it is.
Well, have you had any of those moments, either one of you, where somebody may have contacted you and done the whole, hey, this didn't work for me, or just asking you something about the book, or offering their theories? Go ahead,
James. So the number one criticism that I've gotten is really, really funny to me. And yeah, I kind of mean that insultingly. That's fine. Basically, I wrote this book, Fat Camp, which is a slasher set in a fit camp for overweight teenage boys. And the criticism that I always get is from people who think I'm fat shaming. And I'm like, You clearly didn't read the book. If you had read the book, you would know that it's 100% from that viewpoint of dealing with fat shaming my entire fucking life. Right. And then the number 2 criticism that I get is you didn't make the female characters fully rounded and they just come off as very flat and sexualized. And yeah, they absolutely do. And you know why? Because number 1, the whole book is about slasher tropes. So hello. And number 2, because it's told from the point of view of an 18-year-old male. And I've been an 18-year-old male, so I feel comfortable saying that when I was an 18-year-old male, I did not care if my counselor was a well-rounded human being who had many other things going on in her life. I cared how she looked in her skirt. So that's what he focuses on. And the reason that I bring this up is because the two always go along with I didn't finish the book or I didn't read it because.
Right.
And I think it's so weird because, you know, you go back to like, I don't remember the person who wrote the article, but there's this great article called The Death of the Author. And the entire thing is about the relationship of authors and audiences and how once we put something out there, it becomes the audiences and how each person who interacts with things gets to add their own view to it, right? Like we no longer get to control what's out there. We've given you everything we can. And I'm so fine with that. If you read my stuff and you have a problem with it, let's talk about it. I'd love to hear it because at the very, very least, I want to learn for next time. When your problem is I looked at your cover and I didn't read it, I can't take that seriously. That's your opinion. That's great, but there's really no reason to tell me about it. That's my whole thing. All right, who's up?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, James, because I was pumping your book on a call that I was in, and it was a video call. I'm watching these two people who I know as friends. They're also creatives, and both of them are weight challenged. And so I started mentioning your book because I mentioned you. And they're like, oh, that name sounds so familiar. And I said, well, perhaps you know of Fat Camp. And I started giving the pitch for it. And I'm hoping that I gave a good pitch. But I could see their faces, that they had already like prejudged. Fat Camp, the name, it's a slasher. They were immediately thinking of people far too wobbly to get away, that this is going to be the joke. And I said, that's what you're thinking. However, this is not what it's about. It really talks about the emotions that are involved with how you get to these areas where how you feel about yourself is metamorphosized into how you deal with life and how you cope with food and people and all of this. And what's great is that it has this gallows humor and it understands people and of an age and I had to go down that because I mentioned the name, right? And it's just it's kind of like horror in and of itself, which is I've started telling people that whenever I hear someone who's a cineast, now cineasts want to see everything. That's part of the bragging rights. When you say you're a cineast, that means you will watch the student film of Akira Kurosawa because you're a completist, right? And you could watch wedding photos, of somebody because it's that person. You are a completist, and you are about cinema. You're not even saying I'm a movie lover or I love certain types of movies. You say if it's cinema, I want to see it. Every time I talk to a cineast, they need to give me a protocol of how the horror movie that they like, it's not anything like these other ones. And so it's like they have to go, well, it's like you find somebody's porn stash. It's like, well, that's for special occasions. That's not how I look. It's not how I look at women. That's just a moment in time, right? And so, it's that whole thing of almost like it's porn. Like you have to apologize for what you like. You have to apologize for the incendiary moment, the grabber, the thing that is provocative, which is what we look at anyway. And so I had that exact experience, James, where I could see that they were prejudging it, and by the end, I think I got them past the shock of, and I was realizing I'm talking to two very overweight people about this book, and I am not very overweight, and they are looking at me like I'm fat shaming them. Like I don't get it. Like I came in with a Polish joke, right? And it was really uncomfortable and kind of exciting because of that.
And that's kind of the thing, because as much as it annoys me, it was so incredibly purposeful. It was absolutely to make you do what everyone does to us, which is immediately have that reaction while having no idea who the main character is or knowing anything else about them. Only I kind of flipped it, and I made you think that I'm making fun of fat people when it's really this like super deep. I don't want to say super deep. That wasn't the right word, but it's this like, coming of age tale really, and it's more about dealing with grief and finding yourself. But it was absolutely purposeful. Like I went with Garbage Pail Kids style drawings,
Right.
because I want that gross factor and I want you to go, "Oh, what's wrong with this guy?" Which is a terrible marketing concept, everybody. Don't do this. But from a social commentary and let's be honest, a giant middle finger, that's what it was. It was to make you have that reaction because that's what we deal with every day.
Yeah, yeah.
And now it annoys me.
on my side of that, I have a book that I entitled "Screaming for Pleasure: How Horror Makes You Happy and Healthy." But how horror makes you happy and healthy is the subtitle, right? So it's smaller on the book. "Screaming for Pleasure" is the big title. So when my book dropped, the day it dropped, I would go on Amazon and I would get a lot of porn. It would come up with porn because Screaming for Pleasure was a double entendre. I tried to make it a double entendre. It was like a nod to Pauline Kael books. And I liked the idea of the provocative nature of it. And I thought I was so fucking clever naming it that. And I still think I'm so fucking clever for naming it that. But it came with a price, which is the first time I'm talking with anybody, they get this look of like, oh, am I supposed to get turned on? and they look at it like the first thing they think of is a sex book. So obviously I come off as a rather perverted person as I walk the streets. But the double entendre is that you're going to be seduced by this. We are seduced by the dark side of us. We look at those things with a level of shame, and I'm saying no. This is no emotion is a bad emotion. What you do with an emotion could be bad, but having these emotions aren't bad. And the things that I get from fans, because horror is universal, it means that my fans go across all walks of life. And I get the fan who will compliment me over and over again about how I don't have an agenda. And that bothers me because I know what they're trying to say. It's this Morse code of thank God that you're not hitting me with a bunch of social commentary all the time. And I am. And I think
absolutely.
I think in a way that's what's great is that they're telling me that I'm not coming off as burning tires. But I'm also in a conversation that I wouldn't normally be having if I was someone different than who I am, right? It's like this little gentleman's agreement kind of conversation. You know what I love about you? You don't have an agenda. It's all about horror. It's all about the movies. You're a real fan. I'm like, okay. That's a very interesting thing. You're just bringing that up out of nowhere. It's really nothing about my book. It's really nothing about my show. It's about them ready to proselytize to me what is wrong with entertainment these days.
Right.
That's all those people. It's just a precursor. So many times because I have the right scent. I was in the military. I'm a firefighter. I'm a white guy. I'm middle-aged. All this stuff. I get these conversations that aren't about me at all, but I'm just the right widget to speak to. And so they come walking on over, give me a nice little saunter, and it's just a precursor. Oh, you are distributing this thing. I've read it, and I did not feel that you support Malcolm X in some overt way. Therefore, now I can speak to you about blah. And I get shitty conversations like that. On the other hand, I get a lot of people. That's definitely the minority. Those folks who come with that kind of thing about my agendas, that they don't exist. The other side is people who get it on an emotional level, right? Where it's not just in the head, but it's in the heart, it's in the gut. It's a whole quinella kind of thing when I'm talking about horror. I don't just talk about it in an academic manner. I bring in personal, but I also bring in the idea of being a fan and having that separation that James talked about before, where there's author and there's fan, and the author has to be a fan as well to have that universe work so deliciously that you come up with good things to write. So I don't have I have stalker-esque kind of people sometimes. No one's bad, but I have some people who write me a lot. And there are some people who write me a lot that I'm overjoyed whenever they write me. It's like, wow, thank you. Thank you for writing me. I was just about to throw it all in, and then you wrote something really nice about my episode. But then I have the one or two people who write, and it's a weird complaint, almost to that weird level of, the thing that I like is that you don't have an agenda. It'll be more of, that's not horror, right? I'll get, that's not horror.
That's my pet peeve.
Yeah, and I don't hear from these people ever. And then the only time that I hear is that I have slighted Asian horror. I get that one a lot, or whatever horror is. I've noticed that you haven't talked about New Mexico horror with bubblegum and masks. Yeah, I haven't gotten there yet. I'll get there, but I haven't gotten there yet. Yeah, I'm a one-man show. I'm sorry. But I get those pointed things that let me know that they're probably not even listening, that they just they looked. I was on the list. They saw me that I was going to talk about Silence of the Lambs, and I said that it's a horror movie, and they were like, fuck this guy. No. And they write me to tell me how I'm wrong. And then the other side is, I'm looking through his catalog, and I'm not seeing my keyword. So I'm going to tell him he's only partaking in a certain level of horror, and how dare you. And that's a great wake-up call. That's actually worked a few times. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, shit, you're right. I did have blinders on about that. I never even thought of it. Like my book, I did not put anything in about LGBTQ. And there's a huge area of horror that you can talk about that. So I ended up having people on my show, but I realized after the book came out, when I got a really, really glowing review, except for the one thing that I must say is that Bradley has hit on all of these different places, but a nary a mention of LGBTQ. And I was like, you're absolutely right. And there's a lot I could have said, especially since I have a chapter talking about sexuality and shame and where we go with horror and how it talks to that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think we're it was a great question, but I think we may have forgotten about poor Paul Sheldon. We need to get back to Paul.
Well, I want to ask Don one thing really fast. Don, especially with your book, The Token Black Guide, have you gotten,
oh God,
quality responses, or do you get a lot of, we've heard enough from you, or have not enough people bought it? Should I push it right now so everybody goes to buy it so they can give you a... Go read it.
Push me like,
push you down the stairs.
I was going to say, push me like Paul.
But yeah, how are the reviews and stuff? Like, do they focus on bad shit or what?
The reviews I've gotten are all great except for one. It was from a cousin because, sometimes family is harder. And she just basically pointed out some grammatical stuff. And I was like, good, hit me on that. I'm cool with that. But no, as far as people who've contacted me, there've been I had a TED Talk. And what was hilarious was somebody obviously missed the point of my TED Talk. It was talking about narratives and the importance of having narratives and telling your narrative, not hiding it, sharing it with the world. And because I happen to mention Trayvon Martin as an example of how someone's narrative can be dismantled, recreated, just dragged through the mud because they're not able to tell it, or we're not listening to people that know them. Someone commented under the video, well, if you comply or if you respect the law, you don't have to worry about. And I'm sitting here like, you did not listen to a word of what was said in this 10-minute TED Talk that talked about delving deep into stories, more, and not always accepting the first story that comes out. But then there, I've had people with the other book, Bastards of the Bayou, a Southern horror thriller set in, well, I was going to say outside of New Orleans, but set in Southern Louisiana. I've had a couple of people who, family members, friends, and then a couple other people who read it that kind of had, and I'm not going to say they were as bad as Kathy Bates' character in this film, but it was kind of that same line of thinking, which is, this is what I thought should have happened. And James saw like one of the posts that some of the people who read the book left. They're like, "Oh my God, I can't wait for the sequel." I'm like, I'm not writing a fucking sequel. This book is done. That's it. That's the only part of it. I said there'll probably be some references to this story in the next book, but there is no continuation with this one. And it's not because it can't go anywhere. It's just, it's good where it ends.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's, well, I'll let people it just came out earlier this year, so I'll give some people some time to read it so they can see why it could end and why it couldn't. Maybe I'll come back to it one day if I'm tied up in some strange woman's house to a bed and she says, "Hey, write this." And we're like, sure.
Didn't I tell you we can't talk about being tied up to women's beds on this show? Gosh.
The rules just fall.
I'm your number. Well, you know what? Let me jump into this one before we get started. And one of the questions I was going to save till the end. But Scott and James, you both brought this up as far as this idea that Paul is in this house. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know who's got him. He doesn't know any of the circumstances of what's taking place. I feel because of the way that people received Kathy Bates, at least her presence on screen,
mm-hmm.
I feel as though, and this has been brought up in a couple of other, I guess, similar stories with television shows, action, a lot of different things that have taken place with crime or with true crime. I feel as though the audience has that extra bit of fear because she's not what we would consider traditionally attractive. Because of her weight, because of the looks, because of her age, and because of even her mannerisms. There's this perception, and I felt that one a little bit more when I rewatched this past week, where I don't think audiences were not that they need to be sympathetic to her, but
mm-hmm.
their viewpoint, or at least even Paul's view of what's taking place, he would have probably been less guarded if this had been, say, like 1990, if it had been Michelle Pfeiffer in 1990, if
right.
that was who was capturing him, or at least confining him. And I just want to get your thoughts on it as far as if that's the way, if that's possible, or if you saw it that way, or if it's, it's going to be scary, no doubt. But I just felt like with that 1990 audience and even 2020, the way it's going to be received is I don't think that we're going to see her. I'm sorry, we don't see as scary of a movie if she is more pleasant looking in whatever you would deem that, as far as whatever society standards are at the time.
Cool. Actually, can I jump in really fast? I just want to add one little thing to this question. I think that the fact that we didn't know Kathy Bates also mm-hmm. really adds to this.
Yes.
Like, this is her first film. This is like, this isn't Michelle Pfeiffer. It's not Julia Roberts, somebody we're used to seeing all the time. So right. Does that also enhance the fear? Mm-hmm. All right, Scott, take it away.
Interesting stuff. Kathy Bates had minor roles. She was acting in movies since the 70s. She was in a movie with Dustin Hoffman called Straight Time, but her role was really small. And so she was kind of known in theater. She's big in theater, and she was known in independent films as like this really reliable character actress who did supporting roles. She was in, I think, Men Don't Leave was a movie that was done by the guy who directed Risky Business. It was like his his follow up to that. And so she was known, but certainly not, she had seen stealing moments where the critics would mention her, but she wasn't known at all. She definitely was not someone who held a movie. And I have to say, if I was going to say anything, James Caan wasn't an actor. I always saw him as a personality more than an actor. I never saw, and I apologize for that sounding rude to James Caan fans, but it wasn't that I never thought of him as really stretching into different types of roles. He had a style that was very much James Caan. And I have to say, I would not have expected James Caan. Like when I read the book, I was thinking Malcolm McDowell as Paul Sheldon, because he's duplicitous. There's two sides to this guy, and I could see him doing it, and I could see him being scared, and I can see him, looking beaten up. There's always been this real hardiness to James Caan. So him being weak, I wasn't sure how he was going to pull it off. And anyway, the long short of that is that we have two actors who hold this movie together that stuns me. It's such great work. They really do fantastic work in this movie, and they sell it. They sell something that could be really, really rough. On the look of her, it's really interesting that you would mention that, because I was watching it yesterday, and you mentioning Michelle Pfeiffer, where my mind went was how it would have been an interesting and different movie until she gets the blues when it rains, and how horrifying it would be to have the winsome, beautiful, whip smart Michelle Pfeiffer walk in that stunned look with her hair messed and saying, "I may leave you now because I don't want to put the bullets in the gun." And it's like, that would have worked for that would have made that one moment super impactful.
Right.
But I think it would have been a different movie. And you mentioned 1990, and I think it's the end of this cycle. Like when I was watching Misery again, I said, it's very interesting. This is another of these movies where there's this guy where the woman is the problem, right? The woman, fatal attraction. He has an affair, and look what she does to this fucking guy, and she boils the rabbit, and what a horror she is. And disclosure, he has this whole thing, and boy, she ruins. There's this whole thing of psycho women. Right? They're now in this world, and they're getting psychotic, and the man is trapped. And here we have this man tied to a bed. He's going to get fucking hobbled by her. And instead of having an affair with her, he really does have an affair with her. He's a romance novel writer, right? Mm-hmm. He's not. And I forgot that he was a romance novel writer, but a romance novel writer is trying to elicit flirtation with the audience.
Right.
They want to flirt with the audience. They want to make it sexual. And so he's caught by this lonely woman who's killed off her family and other people. And she's alone, driving herself crazy with Jesus in this farmhouse. And so it is fatal attraction. It is this thing one more time. And so I think her look, she could look like Meryl Streep, she could look like Michelle Pfeiffer, she could look like Glenn Close, she could look like Kathy Bates. And whatever she looks like, it's still that same monster that for some reason was so threatening in the 80s. And I think it's still threatening now, and maybe it's coming back. But that whole thing of the woman who is emasculating the guy because the guy is just trying to be a guy, and look, she's taking it too far. So I think it's a more honest look in a weird way that Kathy Bates looks the way she does. It's very much like the book. The book, I was thinking of Pat Ast, who used to be in like Andy Warhol films, and I think she was Crazy Fat Ethel in a movie called Crazy Fat Ethel, weirdly enough. And she was very much a character actor, but King did not write a flattering character. He made it a very unflattering character. She was worse than Kathy Bates. Kathy Bates was the sanding of the hard, sharp edges. And if I was to say anything about this movie, it sands away all the hard, sharp edges, and that were in the book at least. So yeah, there's something about that look of her, but I think no matter what, she's the same monster. And so I think it may have been scarier because she looks like she might actually be able to take on a wounded James Caan. But I think the idea that she's also using drugs on him and has him tied down is a real frightening thing. The idea that you could be strong and it doesn't matter because she's in control in this really interesting way. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but that's where my brain went with it.
So let me add this. What do you think? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is Rob Reiner's first try at horror too, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking back. I don't think he did any other horror. He had done Stand By Me, so he had done King and was had a big hit. It's kind of funny. I was coming on here with the idea of the perfect double features, The Princess Bride and then this. And I think they actually were one after each other, Rob Reiner films. I think Princess Bride came out right before Misery came out. It may have been the movie. Maybe there was one in between them. But they feel very similar in strange ways. I had just watched Princess Bride a couple of weeks ago. And then we go from that to Misery, and these two stories that have this bedroom chronicles feel. There is something about Misery that I think Rob Reiner is doing his best. Like when I said sanding off all the sharp edges, he does. I think he does everything that he can to not make a horror movie here, and he still makes one. But the lighting, I was watching it yesterday. I realized how none of the backdrops look real. It almost feels like Rope, where Rope had these fake backgrounds, and it was almost like talking about the characters being as fake as they were. The lighting never looks like outdoor lighting. I mean, this is Barry Sonnenfeld. This is no amateur, right? But there's a very Hallmark family movie kind of lighting to this. It's soft. There are a lot of, what's that called? Cookie cutter crackliture, where you have squares on the floor and weird designs in shadow that are just in the background. The backdrops all look fake. It looks like a soundstage. And the angles, there are a few moments where there's directorial flair, but for the most part, it's shot in a comedy fashion. And so it's really interesting to me. Richard Farnsworth and Saberhagen, Francis Saberhagen, are comic relief. Everything's about feistiness in their relationship, and so that wasn't in the book. They weren't that way. If they were, that certainly wasn't the only thing that you talked about with those characters. So there is this. In fact, for a while, it's almost comical when she goes off her first time about the profanity. It's funny until it's not funny. When she finally spills the soup, and it's a great moment because it catches you off guard. You feel awkward comedy going through this movie, and then it's not. And I wonder if that was thoroughly intentional, not him apologizing for making a horror movie, but doing it like, here's Norman Rockwell gone absolutely insane. Here's a romantic comedy gone bad. Here's a romance novel where the guy decides he wants to kill somebody instead of making it sexy. And maybe that's where it was. But it was really interesting to me that it was almost interchangeable at times. You could have Peter Falk and Fred Savage there. And it looked about as realistic as a Boys' Room did in that movie, where it's all that flat comedy lighting. And the two just kind of mirrored together while I was watching. I'm like going, I didn't even... that's probably how he got this movie. How weird is that? That probably some executive said, he did a movie about two people sitting around reading. He could probably do another one. I don't know. But it's really interesting.
Well, and William Goldman did the script for Misery.
Right.
And of course, he wrote Princess Bride. And one of the things that I read when he was talking about it, he was mentioning how he wanted to keep some of the crazier shit from the book, and Reiner kept knocking it back down. And he's like, at the end of the day, he was right. And I think about that a lot. Like I probably read that, I don't know, years ago, but I found it again this week. But I agree. Like, as much as the amputation is awesome in the book, I feel like the hobbling stays with us. I feel like if you amputated the foot, we'd be like, okay, they amputated a foot. And especially now, the post Saw, would we even give a shit? You know, whereas the hobbling sticks with you no matter what year it is. We watch that ankle fucking, I don't know if it shatters or what, but when that foot goes sideways, we all cringe. Yeah. And the only other movie that does that to me is a comedy. It's Ready or Not. And it's that fucking nail. And I rewatched Ready or Not 2 nights ago. And I still freaked out as soon as I saw the nail. I was like, no. I don't want to see. I've seen it like 20 times. And I feel that about The Hobbling as well. Like, I've seen this movie so many fucking times. And yet I sit there cringing knowing it's coming. And yet there's that part of me that can't wait for the second hit.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and I don't even have to see the second hit because, I mean, they don't show it, but you don't even need the second hit because it's already, it would probably take something away if you saw the second one.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, the horror isn't the second hit. The horror is her saying just one more.
Yep.
One more. Right. That's where, you know, you see the intense pain, you see the horror, and it's the idea of, oh, I just lived through this horror and I have to relive it one more time. And that's, it reminded me of a much more graphic thing, which was, I think, 120 Hours. Was that the name of the film?
The guy 127, yeah.
Yeah. And the whole thing when they give you a narration of what nerves are and how they work before he starts cutting. And then they just have this musical trill. They don't have to do anything else. It's like a white flash and a musical trill. And that musical trill is the sound of your nerves telling you you're a fucking maniac. You must stop. Mm-hmm. And I had that same feeling with the ankle. It's wonderful because it's super imaginative. And I think you're right about the I think the horror of the amputation would have been where we go to our happy place. We disengage. Yep. You know, we would see that and we would distance ourselves from the gore. It was like when she falls on the typewriter and it's an obvious dummy and it looks terrible and they can't cut fast enough, right? They just can't cut fast enough. It distances you because you know it's a prop. And I think if we saw the foot go to the floor, even though that is an amazing thing, you know, that they would do that. I think we would distance ourselves and say that's a prop, you know, that's a Tom Savini special, and we'd be done with it. But there's something about the reality, like Don, you said ankles. For me, it's knees. Any movie that has a knee injury, because I've had both of my knees injured, and so I watch like Johnny Utah jump and land in that cement culvert in Point Break, and I cringe every time. You know, there are certain movies where I start to sweat because I know if there's going to be a knee injury. And so there's something about that. Eyes, fingernails, the joints, when we see that kind of, but not arms as much. You can break arms a whole bunch. You could be in like martial arts films and they break 17 fucking arms. But when it's a knee or it's an ankle or an Achilles tendon, you know, things like that really do stick with you. So interesting that you talked about that. But I think it's a different story, and I think the one that we got is the popular one, the one that made the money, the one that got seen by people, which is what you want to make a movie for, and it's the one that won an Oscar for an actress in a horror movie, which was unheard of. And yet, when I think about the book, it's one of those things where I go, if they made this movie, it'd have been a darker movie, and it just would have been a bunch of us in black T-shirts at conferences talking about the great lost film that was Misery that nobody went to see.
Yeah,
but it would have been great, right? I mean, the thing that they don't go into, and it's not the horror aspects. The thing that I loved about the book that's not in the movie, except for a slight bit, like a few quick moments, is how there is a twisted love affair between the writer and the reader in creativity. He falls in love with his character, Misery Chastain. He falls in love with the books that he hates in that book. He falls in love with the process of creation. and he does not want to create. That's why, even though the hobbling is really bad, the one that gets me is him having to burn the book that he just wrote.
Boo, don't talk about that. No, I'm just kidding.
because that's psychological. And the thing that was great in that book, and where I think, King, when he works small, like I said before, and how this and the Dark Half and Cujo talk personally, and Pet Cemetery talk personally about his darkness. There's a sadism that's there, a mental cruelty. And he hit on that mental cruelty so well. He's going through, getting rid of his best friend, cocaine and alcohol. And he's working through that in a way in this book. He's like talking about how resentful he is over where he's ended up. And so that resentment and that sadism, Annie Wilkes is amazingly sadistic in the book. We know how bad she is almost immediately. She makes him drink pail water after she mops up the floor after he makes a mess. And he says he's thirsty because he's on drugs from the very beginning. It's not a little bit of pain pill. They have him talking about these the water rising over rotting planks on a pier. The pain is the pier bones sticking out of the water, and the pills are the water rising over, and he's in euphoria. And so he is literally addicted to her. And he's addicted to doing this and getting out, but he has built this prison himself. And she's to the point where she's taping hairs to books. She knows long before she lets known that he's been out of the house or out of the room. And she's just playing with him. And there's this whole thing of like my abusive childhood that comes up in that. This thing of adults who do these things to children. That it's, no, I'm not hitting them, but boy, I'm mentally torturing them. And that's why that book burning was such a big deal. It's like the thing that you think you're fucking special. And that's a thing that the book talked about that the movie doesn't talk about that much. The resentment of the audience to the author. You think you're fucking special? Oh boy, that ain't working. That's the way you do it. Play your guitar on the MTV. You're a writer, huh? Well, write me this. You think you're better than me? And there is that bit to Annie Wilkes, a passive aggressive, where she burns that book, the thing that makes him different. She is owning that destiny, Misery, Chastain, and she does not want him and what he really wants to write about. She doesn't want that. She puts him in his place. She has him burn that thing. And to me, that's the amazing, the part that's missing, the rough edges that are missing, is this twisted love affair. This thing that's somewhat like Breakfast at Tiffany's, which I think is one of the most twisted love affairs ever. This weird prostitution romance. And it really came through in the book to where I felt like an adrenaline in my mouth. I wasn't even writing yet, but I was entertaining being a writer. And it was hitting on the creative process in this really disturbing way. And I love, like, Misery, the book, the cover, the picture of King on the back is him with a pair of glasses in his hands, and he's biting the arm of one of the glasses. And he has this look on his face like he's beleaguered, and he's exhausted, and he's angry. And it was the perfect picture to put on Misery. And so all of that's missing. And it's just, a wonky, crazy, goofy, monster character. And that kind of makes me feel that Fatal Attraction taste to it. Which is like, I'm just kind of an innocent schlub making books. And now we've got this thing. They talk about it a little bit at the end when he says, it may sound twisted, but I have to thank Annie Wilkes. She got this other book out of me. And there is that thing, the begrudging that he is somewhat in love with the part of her that loves the part of him that creates, that makes him something. And they don't touch on that much in the movie. And so, yes, the movie is the right movie for 1990, for a mass audience, for Rob Reiner, for Goldman, and for Kathy Bates, and for James Caan. It is a great quality entertainment piece. But it is one of the very few horror films that I understand and I nod if someone says that it's not a horror film because it tries so hard to not be one. Yet, I think that's what makes it more horrific. I think that makes it more of a horror film when it has this Hallmark Hall of Fame kind of lighting and comic timing that's in there. And when it turns dark, when she's there with the syringe and the gun saying, I love you, that all works so well that it's a great buildup to some really powerful horror moments. But yeah, so long answer, as always, with S.A. Bradley.
No, I loved that. Don, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that was great.
So
I was sitting here just taking notes.
Nice. So the only thing I want to add to it is going back to what I was saying about the amputation and the hobbling. The other one that they changed in the book when they kill the police officer, I believe it's been, 10 years since I read it or so, but I believe she kills him with a lawnmower.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like that would work in this. I feel like that would pull you out so badly. And what they do instead is so sudden, so fast, so absolutely horror. Fucking great. Yeah. This gunshot, number one, it proves she will pull the trigger.
Yes.
Number two, the body fucking falls in the way, creating another obstacle on top of the fear she just gave him.
Yep.
And she showed, and I don't know that this is intentional, but this is what it comes down to. She showed you contacted someone, you caused this.
Yep. Yeah. Which is
holy fuck, what a great moment.
Oh yeah, and that falls right back to that whole thing of the sadism, the emotional cruelty. She's very much, and there's no secret that King writes devout Christian characters in a very unflattering way. He goes to, he's not saying all Christians are like that, but he does make people who hold themselves or others at a certain level and standard to be the hypocrites that they are, that it's always about punishment. It's always about getting you to do the right thing the way that I wanted to, and I have divine stuff on your side. It's very subtle in this movie, but it's on the walls. I think there's something about the truth. There's a sign that says something like the purity of the truth. That's some kind of platitude. Her cross is lit several times so that it glints. And I think that was a very big part of the book. And when she just puts the wheelchair at the top and says, I'll make you dinner. I'll make you something to eat. She says, you crawl over this fucking guy. You get into that chair. I'm not cleaning your mess up. So that's exactly how I felt about it, James. It was that death was so good, and it was over the top in the book. I go back and forth on the end because there was this really interesting thing where she just doesn't die. In the book, he like jams a whole bunch of paper down her throat, like he fists her throat. And there's a couple other things that end up happening, and it's almost like an afterthought. It's like the police report. He's on the ground. Her body isn't there. She chokes and dies off camera or off book. And then they find her. She's finally died halfway up to the house with a chainsaw in her hand. And I was like, oh, that's fucking creepy. But how do you do that in the movie? I mean, you'd have to see her. It would still be anticlimactic because she would have to just die. It'd be like the shark having a heart attack under the water in Jaws, right? So you can't go with that, whether it's poetic or not. It's just not going to work in cinema. And so I think that they did the right thing in that. And I love that you mentioned that whole thing of Farnsworth getting shot, because it's a great horror moment. And it has all these wonderful little insights to the characters. And I will say that's the really creepy stuff. The penguin always facing south and everything. She knows. They do at least talk to that a little bit. What was in the book that was so cat and canary. But that was like the halfway point of the book, if not earlier, that she lets him know that she knows that he's been out of the room and that everything that he's tried to been so clever, all hope is dashed. And so, I mean, the book was really nasty, and probably one of the reasons that I really resonated so much with it. And it felt, the weird thing is that it also felt like I was learning a little bit about Stephen King, right? I'm Annie Wilkesing it a little bit. It's like how he manipulated me with the Bachman books. Like the Dark Half is a really nasty book because it's how he felt about having his little ability to play he was somebody else taken away because somebody loved him too much. Somebody was too excited by his work, and he left too many breadcrumbs, and they spoiled his party, and he couldn't be Richard Bachman anymore. And he basically, in I believe the preface to the Bachman books, the intro to the Bachman books, he basically uses his celebrity and knowing that you really like him to make you feel sorry for the Bachman books no longer being able to be done. It's really, if you reread that, it is amazing how manipulative good old Steve is being to get you to feel mea culpas for the Bachman books. And so we're Annie Wilkesing it a little bit with Misery. Reading the book, we're hearing the love-hate. He's very honest about the love-hate. We're having to be painstakingly honest about our love-hate with him in certain aspects of the book. But we're getting pieces of him. I remember it was like It, when I read It. I was in New Hampshire. I was in Portsmouth, New Hampshire in the military. And he mentions the Fox Run Mall in that book. And one of the characters was shopping at the Fox Run Mall. And that was across the street from my military base. And I remember like wanting to frame that, like, oh my God, I'm in Stephen King's world. That's a very strange, yet I think very honest feeling that we get. We are entertained when we get that, like I often wonder why my dog likes getting petted so much. Maybe if I had a giant hand going down my entire body, I might understand it and go, wow, I might follow you everywhere that you go because you give me food and you give me that great feeling. And I can have that with my entertainment. When you entertain me, I'm vulnerable. You're vulnerable. And that vulnerability comes with a kind of response that we have at varying levels. I make the books, you read the books, it's an exchange. We can have some pleasantries. Sometimes it gets, some people want a little bit more. Some people will give you hugs at conventions and all of that stuff. But it is a vulnerability. So when someone betrays you in the arts or entertainment, it's more personal. So it's a really interesting bit that's going on in that book and in that movie.
One of the other things that I thought was very interesting, at least in the telling of the film or the capturing of this in the film, is the way that the clues themselves are missed. Almost because of the comedic aspect of the sheriff and his wife when they're going and she's driving and she puts her hand on his thigh. And how cute! I mean, as you get older, it gets cuter. But when you're younger, You're kind of like, "Oh, that's kind of old people possibly wanting to have sex."
Right.
But when she puts her hand on his thigh, he's so like hell bent on keeping up appearances and business as usual. He grabs her hand, moves it over, and says, "While we're in this car, you're my deputy. When we're out of the car, You're not my deputy." You've got to conduct yourself as a professional. And, that funny scene where she seems like, this lady still wants to get it on. But then it's interrupted by him seeing something that many people pass by every day or had been passing by because he notices that this tree has been sheared. It's broken and puts two and two together and figures like, oh, well, something did this. Maybe he ran off the road and he slips in the snow. Mm-hmm. He gets frustrated and it's like, fuck it. Let me just go back and we'll keep looking somewhere else. And, 20 feet away, a tire is sticking out of the snow. But I love how, even though this is a horror film, this is psychological horror, you have to have those comedic elements thrown in, especially by, Rob Reiner, who's directing this film. He's making those comedic things stand out to kind of pull you off guard, but then also do the whole, holy shit, you were that, you get frustrated as an audience member, but then you also do see it as a little bit funny, like, oh man, if they'd only seen this, he was interrupted because of this. And then of course his wife makes that funny statement. But I also appreciate the way that they get written into this film, as far as their interactions, and they show how not even just married couples, but partnerships, after a certain while, not that things get old, but things get different. And in the case of them working together, you see how, he's obviously a loving husband. He's a good sheriff. He has a good rapport with her and the town. But that idea that because she's sitting at his desk and she's doing her job, but she's using his desk, that frustrates him because he's like, oh, I'm looking for that thing.
Right.
What are you talking about? It was the thing that was on my desk. You're messing up my system. And he goes over and reaches like, there it is. And it was that quote from the book that he's trying to put two and two together.
Right.
Because he's seen a few clues throughout the town of something is not right. Nobody, brought this guy in. He hasn't been in the hospital. I'm looking at this car door. It's obvious that somebody, pried it open. So he wasn't alone. And you're seeing at least him working his way up to where he finally gets to the house, finds Paul, and of course is ended by Annie. But what's even better is how you start seeing these clues come together on the part of Paul as far as what's going on here. Because initially he's all in it. Hey, I'm trapped here. She rescued me, believing the lie that she's telling him. Right. Until it starts to unravel for her, where she says, "Oh, I was in town and I did this. I called this person. Oh, the phones are working. Not here, not out of the house. I had to go to town. Oh, well, can you send some? Well, the orthopedist, he said, or orthopedic surgeon said, it wouldn't be good to move you because it's really not important. You're not a really high risk. So, yeah, he just said, stay off your feet."
Right.
And it drives that moment where it's kind of like, I missed my daughter's birthday. I missed this. I need to do this. I need to do X, Y. Then he's going through the torture from her, the psychological torture from her, to where he starts figuring out something is not right here beyond what he already understands. And he starts finding that scrapbook, which I didn't read the book, but from the film, I understand that for me, Annie left the scrapbook out for him to find. So that it would drive in the fear, because she makes that comment about, well, that's what I told him on the stand when I was on the stand in Denver. And you haven't put it together that she's done some shit like this before, because she's so vague about it. But then he finds that scrapbook that talks about her killing or at least responsible or connected to these deaths of babies and other occurrences, that she's keeping records of what she's been involved in, to where he knows that hope isn't actually gone, but things are definitely a lot more dangerous. This is not an obsessed fan. This is a psychotic killer. Right.
Oh yeah, you're hitting on something that I thought was really, really cool about the book, and it's also in the movie, but it's not as exclamation pointed, which is that she is controlling everything. Right. She is he needs to get her high on Misery Chastain's the fulfillment of all the things. Basically, their Rise of Skywalker. Making the Rise of Skywalker in a novel for her. It's going to fulfill all of her fandom, geekdom things, and he needs to do that to get her off her game, because she plans everything. She doesn't say anything offhand. She rarely loses it until she gets blue, right? And that's where she gets a little suicidal. But she is like the most abusive parent, where she's just the way that you can be, the overused term of narcissist, but the way of making the entire world revolve around them in a way that is controlling and you can't get out of. That's what was in the book. And they kind of have that. Like when she's walking with Richard Farnsworth, and he's kind of buying it, but not quite buying it, because he knows a little bit of extra stuff. And I love how when the guy at the store asks, "Did Wilkes do anything?" "Nope, not at all." He's like, he refuses to give any clues that there might be any kind of implication of any Wilkes of anything. He's playing that same game with her when he's in there. And she kind of knows it. There's that wonderful moment when they're both waiting to see if the other one's still looking down the hall at each other.
Right.
And so two cats going at it. And I love that whole thing of how she's dropping little words, little actions. She's already writing in the fact that she's got the paper and everything in the house, and the table set up, and she's got her backstory. She's done all of this stuff, and she is just letting him maneuver anywhere. She doesn't get crazy, but she comes up behind him with Coco when he's in her bedroom. Fuck. A police officer goes in my bedroom, I am fucking going up on the roof because I'm getting crazy. And she's just kind of like, oh, Coco. She is so controlling of everything. And that's why that whole end of her having to see that thing burnt without her knowing, her Jones, her obsession, her addiction gets to her. And that's the only time that he can possibly raise that fucking typewriter over his head and smash her in the skull. It's really fucking awesome stuff, when you think about it.
One thing I want to add, when Don was talking about the sheriff and the deputy, if you will, what I like about this is that it does bring the comedy, or maybe this was SA, I'm not sure. One of you was talking about how that's the comedy and Reiner put it in there. What it also does is it adds to the horror so much when he gets shot, because he's not a throwaway cop, and he's not some random dude that's just out there. He's not some guy who probably lives alone like Kathy Bates's character does. He has somebody who's been with him seemingly forever and wants him, which tells us that he's a really good guy and that she's so in love with him. And when we blast that fucking hole through his chest, that terror is 100 times worse because she's going to hear about her husband dying.
Right.
And that's such strong characterization that just comes from this little clip of these seemingly throwaway lines that were fun. And I love how much characterization and relationship we get out of that.
Yeah, and I could imagine Virginia, his wife, Virginia, the deputy, like dying, in a few months down the road, just from being alone, being by herself, or struggling with that. And again, like you said, they're not throwaway characters. The best comparison I could come up with for the end of this, the end of the sheriff's participation in the film is at the end of near the end of The Departed, where Leonardo DiCaprio is I forgot who the guy he was taking it, Matt Damon. And as soon as the elevator doors open, he gets shot in the head. Yep. And so you're sitting there like, I've invested this whole movie with Leonardo DiCaprio being the good guy, and this other dirty cop shoots him in the head. And you're sitting there like, holy, like, what the hell is going on? And then it kind of drives the realism there of like, you're not going to have a happy ending in this movie. You're going to have in Misery, you're not going to have a happy ending for anybody. Sure, Paul gets away, but he's affected by this and afflicted by this for life.
And he absolutely should be. Like anybody
exactly.
who was in this position would be. So,
and I'm glad that they did the whole thing of, it's 18 months later. So it's not, a couple of weeks later he's still having nightmares, or maybe a month later he's having nightmares. You're seeing 18 months later, and this dude is sitting there with his publisher, and he can't help but see Annie. And he comments like, I just feel like, she's still out there. And she's like, she's dead. Like, what do you mean? And the fact that his publisher can't even comprehend that the fear that's going on, to the point where she says, well, maybe you should write a story about your exploits and what you went through. And he's, and that seems so odd that I'm going to go ahead and write about the fucking the traumatic event I went through for months just to sell some books.
I love that he calls her on it.
Yeah.
Also, I had no idea that was Lauren Bacall until this viewing.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That was great to see her.
Right? So let me ask you this, to switch gears. Me and Don have talked about this a bit. If they remade this film today, are you cool with that essay, or do you think that that's bad? Would you want a remake?
I'm wondering what new you would want to say, because that's really what, I always think that remakes have a better chance of being good than sequels, because sequels just denature the same story. Whereas remakes give an opportunity to work a story that was good in its time or missed the boat but had some great ideas. It's life. And a good horror story or a good science fiction story has the ability to be reinvented at metaphor and allegory level. I'm not sure if there's a lot more that would be needed to be said about Misery. The only thing that I could think of, it's talking to what I was saying is the difference where they sanded off the rough edges, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there would be space, but there might be space for something much darker after Joker. Joker has changed my mind on what people are willing to look at. And I think it might be interesting to play on that dynamic of blame, who blames who for what, and vulnerability and bullying. That Misery could be really interesting. You could take it in a really incendiary way and talk about it in a Me Too aspect, and have, this guy chained to a bed and this woman, wielding all this brutality on him, a newfound power normally not had, but he's tied, right? So there could be something like that. His own, because, one thing we didn't talk about was his hubris, right? He's writing this book in this high level of hubris. He's killed off this character. It hasn't come out yet. He's out in his normal place where nothing goes wrong because he pays, and he's up in this place. He doesn't even dress for the Colorado mountains. He's like in a Mustang driving a rebel car in the mountains, and hubris, nemesis comes right after hubris, right? So you have this thing where he is damaged by his hubris. He is incapacitated, and this woman comes in. So who knows? There could be some really interesting, pointed stuff that could be said in doing a remake of Misery, where instead of just going towards toxic fandom, we talk more about this dynamic between the two sexes, and this very strange dynamic that we have in this movie, where the power structure has changed. And, Annie Wilkes is a big woman, right? So I said it before. She looks like she might be able to take James Caan, who's rather fit and fiddle when he's damaged so badly. She's not super frail. One punch might not take her out, right? She's a farm girl. So there's that whole danger. I don't know. There's a couple ways that I could see going towards that darkness, because I think Joker works in a weird way, right? It works in a weird way where this is the first movie that's in the vein of Travis Bickle and all of those, where they basically say, no, Travis Bickle, he was right for doing what he did. That's really different than what I grew up with. And I think that's something that people glommed onto that allowed the movie to go as dark as it did, because it was this strange little attack. So maybe you're able to go with Misery down that dark road that King did, if you find the right metaphor for it. So on the surface, no. I mean, I don't think that Misery needs to be redone as it is, but if you could change that up and take that weird dynamic. And I think maybe, and now you got me thinking maybe we should have one, because, that book was written in 1987, I think, 88, somewhere in there. The world has changed drastically. And one of the things that we've learned is that a lot of what was considered progressive 30 years ago only went so far and needed to go over the fence, but we never got over the fence. And now there's this alarming discourse that's happening between the progressives of the old and progressives of now, in this threatened sense that and defensiveness, that what we used to think was progressive is not and never was. And it would be very interesting to play on that dynamic of a story that is rather provocative. A guy in a bed, and it's about fandom, and it's about sadism, it's about narcissism. All that weird shit is in that book. So who knows? Maybe there is something that we should look at these things that we thought we were so proud of ourselves to talk about 30 years ago, and re-examine them and see how they feel now.
If you did remake it, And I was telling James about this idea of flipping the gender itself. So it's a female writer. And again, not even threat of sex, not even this idea that's going on. It's simply this guy who's obsessed with this woman. And Annie's character is now, I don't know, Arnold or whatever. And it's Josh Gad. Very talented. I think he could pull it off as being like that creepy guy. And you could have what's her name, Margot Robbie, because I think having a remake at this point, I don't see the purpose of a remake with this film because it ages very well. There's very little I think that is lost with this film, aside from a few metaphors due to time from 1990 to 2020 or the 2020s themselves. But there are areas to go in. Maybe it's not even a writer. You could turn into another form of celebrity, another form of personality. It could be a YouTuber now. And
right.
And add technology to it. Add the changes to technology into it to where we don't have the cliched thing of, hey, the cell phone service doesn't work here. They actually do have Wi-Fi or they have access to the internet, but there's something that's preventing this person from using it or accessing it, or they happen to use it and people think it's a hoax. Like, oh yeah, you're not her. Oh, this is a publicity stunt. Fuck you. Get off the page.
I see that as kind of interesting. It would be interesting to have someone trapped in a fucking fanboy BB live on a YouTube thing. Like, they're all Annie Wilkes.
And just turning this, that would be another way to do it.
Jesus, that's awesome.
But I think the whole idea of remaking it would have to come down to being like a personal project. Let's say it is Margot Robbie. She sees, somebody shows her Misery, or she's doing a movie with Kathy Bates. They're having a conversation, and Kathy Bates says, "You know what? I wonder what it would look like today." And Margot Robbie and Kathy Bates to get together and get some money. They make the remake. Kathy Bates is the sheriff.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Yeah, and they decide, like, we're gonna make it for an audience today with the stuff that we know. We're not going to really change the source material too much as far as the cat and mouse, the capturing, all those things that are going on. Because there are different ways that you could even approach, her being able to carry the character. If we do keep it as the male captive, female captor, there are different ways that she could have done it. It's snowing outside. She's got dogs or a horse, and she pulls the person behind on a sled or something. There are so many different ways you could approach it. But I think with respect to a remake, I'm on the fence, but I wouldn't turn down watching it.
Right.
Because there's so many things that could be done. If it's like I've told James, I did not like the remake of Psycho because, one, you're making a shot for shot remake. Right. All you're really doing is inserting different people into it. And you lose so much. There was so much that could have been done as a 90s version to a 1960 movie that we missed out on. Because Vince Vaughn came off as creepy as opposed to boyish and charming, like Anthony Perkins' portrayal of Norman Bates.
Right.
So, that's kind of the thing, is you got to keep that general idea, that general feel of the film without trying to portray the previous film.
Right. Well, I think that's why remakes can be better than sequels, that is, if you're going to do remakes, because you can bring something absolutely new. And, like I mentioned, Joker, that movie doesn't make $1 billion if it's not called Joker. You need to have that brand recognition. Yet, that's a movie that completely deconstructs DC Comics. It's like, we don't give a fuck about the canon at all. And I'm stunned that they weren't, like, pilloried for it. But, I mean, everything in that is, like, anti what we expect out of Batman. And so I thought it was brilliant. I think if you can do that with any sequel, you have my blessing. Even if it's a movie that I really like, I'm always going to have that film. You're probably going to get more people watching that film because there's going to be an argument about whether or not it should be remade.
Exactly.
But if you can give me something new on that and excite me with it. I mean, I'm all horror is about surprise. The element of surprise is what we kind of salivate for. So if you can give me something that's really cool, that doesn't feel insulting, then, I'm all for it. I don't want to insult Annie Wilkes people.
I'm just a big believer that remakes are good in that if it opens the door for somebody and it's what makes them love horror, that's good for us in the long run.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And you're normally, not all the time, but normally if you watch it and you like it and you fall in love with that universe, you're going to go watch the original. And then maybe you like yours better. It doesn't matter. I like, I don't know, Guns N' Roses Don't Cry more than I like the original version, And there's going to be people that fucking hate that and other people that are like, yeah, you're absolutely right. But if it got me into that song and then I explored that world, that's how I view remakes. If it gets you into Jurassic Park and now you like other Jurassic Parks or just horror in general, that's a good thing. And at the end of the day, if you really want to fight remakes, stop buying tickets. But guess what, guys? The big thing is it's not necessarily for you. It's for the next person who needs it.
Exactly.
Right. I keep trying to tell people that we're the ambassadors now. We can go in two different ways. At least a guy of my age, I'm an ambassador now. It's not my planet. I'm the janitor. I'm gonna mop up for a little bit. You guys go do the heavy lifting. I'm almost immaterial at this point. But what I can be is I can be a good ambassador for the stuff that I love, and I can be inclusive and say, hey, take a look at this, or I can be all upset that they're erasing my past. Your past is not being erased. You don't have as much future. That's probably what you're really upset about. But the past is not being erased. There are times when it's a joke, when you know that it's just a money grab and stuff like that. But you know what? We look at everything with rose-tinted glasses. I mean, there's like this documentary that's 4.5 hours long called In Search of Darkness. It basically goes from 1980 to 1989 and talks about several films. And it's just the facts, man, talking about these movies. And I have so many people that I know who are like the 80s horror films are the best horror films. The ones you remember fondly are, but you know how much shit there was? There was a ton of shit. And there is always a ton of shit. There was a ton of shit in the 50s, a ton of shit in the 40s. There was a ton of shit in the... Well, there wasn't a ton of shit in the 90s. There was just no horror movies in the 90s, quite honestly. Very few. But you have this thing where there, of course, you're not going to understand why there's these remakes that look like they are because it's the wrong time period. Yeah, you came into your cups in the 80s, and so you're remembering these great movies. And yes, absolutely, we needed The Exorcist, we needed Psycho, we needed Nightmare on Elm Street, we needed Friday the 13th. We needed those things. We did not need all the sequels of those movies. We did not need the Canadian tax board ripoffs that came out of a million slashers until that died. All those things happened. So we talk about remakes as like they're these horrible things. They're just another fad. They're another fucking bell bottoms. Get the fuck over it. You were watching remakes without even admitting it in the 80s. If you watched more than 5 slashers, you were watching remakes. They were just remade of something that happened last week. They were making them so quickly. So, I like to remind people, and it's somewhat rude, but it's true. 2 of the great. 3 of the great horror films of the 80s were remakes. The Thing, The Fly, and The Blob are really, really good. And they're all remakes, and we adore those movies. And that's the thing. There are always shitty slashers, but there are a few really great ones, ones that I absolutely champion. My Bloody Valentine and The Prowler and the really rough ones I thought really did what they were supposed to. Maniac, which is almost so good it shouldn't be considered a slasher. But you have those movies and the rest of them were crap. And so it's the same with remakes. There are a few really good ones. Thank goodness we get to have those things made because there have been some. Like I'm doing a thing on Hills Have Eyes. If you take Alexander Aja's Hills Have Eyes and you take Wes Craven's and you splice them together, you have a perfect horror film. But both of them are imperfect. Both of them have major issues. But you put them both together and you got a really creamy, yummy movie. And I mean, the remake had its, if it wasn't there, people wouldn't probably have gone back to the old one.
Would it differ if the roles were reversed with respect to gender or with respect to sex? Let's say we do have, and I'm just going to pick him because that's the person I chose to begin with. Can it be the same film, or are we looking at something different?
I mean, I feel like you automatically enter a territory based on the world that we live in, where everyone's going to assume he's a perv. Like, we don't get that with Kathy Bates, right?
Okay.
Like, we don't. That's not our first reaction. But if you open the film and Josh Gad has fucking some hot chick tied to the bed, that's absolutely your first reaction.
Yeah.
And I think you would have to work to prove that that's not his intention. And that's the biggest difference that I see.
I think also that movie's kind of been made already. And I think that's why Misery was interesting. I mean, The Collector is the first thing that comes to mind. A guy that basically had The Candy Snatchers would be another one. Or even, was it Shadowlands? Was that what it was? With, it was about South African torture. And they had this woman tortured and, it starred Alan Rickman and I think Madeline Stowe were in this movie, and it was two people, and it was she was blindfolded, and it was torture. He was torturing a political prisoner, and he was playing both because she was blindfolded. He was playing good cop, bad cop himself. He was coming in saying different things because he's Alan Rickman. He can change his voice and all that shit. But it was a really creepy movie. And you couldn't get away from the fact that even though this was a political prisoner film, that there was something very sexual going on. Yeah, it's written in. Yeah, it is written in. It's interesting that you would mention that because perceptions of film, how we read film, is being challenged by having women filmmakers doing that kind of thing. There was a film called XX that came out, all women horror filmmakers making shorts. And the first one was by Jovanka Vukovic, and it's a masterpiece. It's called The Box. It's off of Jack Ketchum's book, short story, which is highly regarded. That gets read in literature classes in colleges. And it's just basically about a father who loses his entire family because his son is on the subway around Christmas, and this guy has a decorative box across from him in the subway, and the kid goes, "What's in the box?" And the father says, "Don't be rude." And the guy goes, "No, he can look in." And the kid looks in, and he's just like, "Oh." And he doesn't say anything. He doesn't look horrified. He just kind of looks like, okay. And from that day on, the kid doesn't eat. And he won't eat. And he's not unhappy. He doesn't want to eat. And so the wife is hysterical. They're taking him to the doctor, and the story is told through the father. And one after another, the boy tells the secret to the sister, and the sisters stop eating. And all of this is happening. He can't stop it, and he can't stop eating. And there's this whole thing in there about his darkness, and he's always been alienated from his family. And as you read this, you're sympathetic with him, even though it's this terribly dark story. All that Jovanka Vukovic did was change the role, the gender, or the sex of the main character. The wife and the mother was the person who was on the subway. The father was the one who was hysterical, trying to get her to go to the doctor and take the kids there. And through the movie, just how we read women and men in roles, I was angry at her in a way I wasn't angry at the father in the short story, because she's supposed to be more maternal. She's cold. Why isn't she worried about her children dying? Why is she so distant? She's just acting as the husband did in the book. They didn't even change the dialogue. And I thought it was a brilliant way to look at how we read stories by who is in what role. And so I think it's a really interesting thing that might happen with Misery, and maybe changing the sexes back is to revert it back to The Collector back in like 1966 or whatever. I don't know if you can get away from. the sexual thing that might happen.
I think it's always going to be there. It is because even with Kathy Bates or Annie's character, as weird as she is, or as weird as the portrayal is, as far as the changing of her attitude, the being nice, basically being the psychopath that she's portraying, you do kind of question the sexuality that's going on there, because when they have dinner, Paul plays around with her because he says, "Oh, Annie, would you have dinner with me tonight?" And even if sex isn't discussed, she still wants to present herself in an attractive manner. She does her hair. She puts on a nice dress. And, as part of Paul's ruse to try and drug her, he's like, "Oh, what am I thinking? We're having a romantic dinner. We need candlelight." And she rushes off to go get it because she's like, "Oh my God, I'm his number one fan. He wrote this book. He's doing this." She's in love with him in several different levels, several different ways. So, even as a viewer, you're kind of questioning, like, she's attracted to him, but is she also sexually attracted to him? We know Paul's not.
Right.
But there's that idea of, is that sexual attractiveness there? Because it's gone from her being a fan to her fawning over him.
Right. And I think that's one of the things that is creepy that hits us as watchers, viewers, readers, is that we know she wants to fuck him. We know she wants to fuck him, but she's one of those, she's in a romance novel world, right? The real nice person with the crucifix around her neck and, the embroidery and the penguin tchotchkes and all of that wants to fuck. She wants to fuck him, but she's going to go about it.
She wants him to rip the bustle open, or the corset off, like you would see in so many of those stories. Right,
but she's doing it in a way that her functioning world will allow her to. Right. She's as polite and as asexual as she can get away with, and so she wants to. I think that's one of the things that we're scared of while we're watching. We're like, ew, is she going to rape this guy? Is she going to have this unattractive person on top of him? Oh, that's so gross. I think that's in there. I think that's one of those little shadows that's kind of peeping up in our subconscious when we're in that. Because I think anytime we're sent to our room or we're put to a bed or whatever, we're vulnerable. When vulnerability is up, I think we go to the scary places, the nervous places. Am I going to be taken care of? If I fall asleep here, is the nurse going to take care of me, or is she going to neglect me? I think in the book, she drives away for a couple days at one point. She just lets him to nearly die of dehydration to prove a point. And that is a disturbing thought in and of itself. But so I think she does want to fuck him. I think there is a sexual piece in there. I think we're fearing that sexual piece much more than we might in some other situation or different characters connected.
Can you imagine how mad she'd be when he doesn't live up to what she expects from his books?
Yeah, right. Or he just can't, he can't perform. He's only broken and shattered, and, it's all under duress.
And drugged up.
Yeah, and drugged up.
All right, so let's go to recommendations. If people liked Misery, what else should they watch, in your opinion?
I say you're the guest. You're more than welcome to go first.
Oh, I'm more than welcome to go first. Okay.
You can also just decline and make Don do it. That's what I do.
That works too. Pass.
Well, I will say that if you liked Misery and you like Kathy Bates, Dolores Claiborne is a pretty good film as well. So I kind of find myself, because there's having to wade through a lot of bad Stephen King adaptations, that some of the good ones would be Dolores Claiborne's a good one. You're once again getting into some of the same kind of dynamics. I would say that Gerald's Game is a pretty good one. I would also go with Pet Sematary. Doesn't have as much, but what I love about Pet Sematary, the original one, is that it really goes with the heart of a man is stonier, and Pet Sematary was a very dark and confessional kind of book for King. I think it says a lot about toxic masculinity that is really interesting. And so it hits on this dark side of King that really is rich and tasty. Movies that are about people getting into these kind of situations, I would say 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Oh man, that was one of mine.
Well, I don't have many of those kind of things. I'll leave that to you guys. I was going to say there's a movie, but I can't remember the name of it, so it's not great. But it was about a dirty bomb going off in L.A. I think it was Your Friends and Neighbors. I want to say it was Your Friends and Neighbors, but I might be wrong on that. I think it was Rory Cochrane starred in it, and he's basically taped himself into the house with plastic, and people are trying to get in, and he's like, no, we'll die because of the dirty bomb. It's really, really freaky, and it falls kind of in that same 10 Cloverfield Lane thing. But that would be the ones that I would say.
Okay,
go ahead, Don.
All right. Well, I was definitely going to say 10 Cloverfield Lane because as we were talking about the flip, that was the one that came to mind, where it's John Goodman, who is holding a couple of people hostage in his bomb shelter because he's worried about aliens coming to, and he says you can't leave because you'll die and all these other things. Lakeview Terrace with Samuel L. Jackson, where he plays the neighbor to an interracial couple. And I don't want to give too much away because it's one of those films where you can watch it once, get everything that's going on there, but just the complete terror that he causes for this family, and the fact that they can't go to anybody because he's a police officer. So there's no out for them. It's not, they can't complain about the noise. They can't complain about lighting. They can't complain about anything because, he's he's a decorated police officer who's well connected and just looks at it as, if you complain, I'm going to find out about it and I'll just make it worse. So there's that. And so they can't escape the situation that they're in. And a couple of classics that came up while we were talking about it. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, Fatal Attraction is always there as far as a good comparison. And a more recent film, it would be It Comes at Night.
Oh, yeah.
Where when I first watched it, I was kind of in the same mindset as Hereditary, as far as like, well, this didn't work for me, this didn't work for me, this didn't work for me. But when I watched it again, I realized, I saw those things I'd missed the first viewing, or at least I saw them a little bit more deeply. And that whole idea of being trapped in your situation, not knowing what is out there, not being able to escape, even if you physically can, and not even having that full resolution, or at least the ending of the trauma. All right, James.
All right. I'm going to start with The Shining. And I say The Shining because, one, it's King, obviously, but I also view it as the ultimate gateway drug to horror. For me, it's one of those movies that was so widespread, like everybody fucking saw it. And it led to people liking horror, or, it sticks with people that don't watch anything else that's horror. And that speaks volumes to me. And I feel the same way about Misery. I feel like Misery is a movie that never lets go of you. So that's one of the places I think King shines. But like my honest love of Stephen King is Shawshank. Shawshank is like the greatest movie ever made, in my opinion. And he wrote it, so there's that. But I'm a big Shawshank guy, a big Stand By Me guy. So when I think King adaptations, I think that's where he shines, is those relationships, right? And like you were talking about, where he really locks it down to a few people. And The Shining definitely has that. It has that one family. It has that one guy dealing with his shit. And it's also so tied into the addiction and the shit King was dealing with. But we get the other side of it. So it's almost like a mirror to the Misery in a way. So that's why The Shining is one of my recommendations. My next one, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
I mean, we get a Misery situation, basically. And while we don't get a hobbling, we get a lot of really weird shit with birds. and some other great stuff and rats and who knows what else. But yeah, I don't want to say too much about that one. If you don't know anything about it, go in blind and just love the shit out of it. We did an episode on it, and I had never seen it before. And I think it was, I don't know, maybe 25 episodes ago, and I've watched it 3 times since then. So it definitely resonated with me, and I think that people should see it. It's one of those things. It's one of those things I don't think should be remade. I think it's fucking perfect the way it is, as far as being remade. But I do think it goes hand in hand with this.
Yeah, Baby Jane is just, that's so batshit crazy. It's almost so ancient and timeless at the same time. You know, it's this weird black and white movie that doesn't feel like it's black and white. You've got these aging actresses that are in there, but you are in that chair. You are.
Next week, we're doing Psycho. So that's another recommendation. You should definitely watch Psycho and come back for that episode.
Yeah, that's right. And another Stephen King shout out, because it doesn't get the love that it should. And I don't know why it doesn't, but Cujo. Really good, tight story. And once again, you know, that entrapped feeling. It's another book, and even the movie, where everything that I thought was going to happen happened in the first 45 minutes. And then you're like, how are they going to get the fuck out of this? And I love Dee Wallace at that moment really shined as a really strong actress, because she's holding that movie together with a child, you know, a child actor. And it's just amazing that she does what she does.
Fantastic. All right. I don't have anything else. Do either of you before we wrap this up?
I do not.
No, I think we've abused poor Paul Sheldon more than
Nobody has abused Paul Sheldon enough. He deserves more. No. All right. So, S.A., I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Yes, thank you.
Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you online and how to be a part of what you're doing on Facebook?
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And I am on anywhere that you get your podcasts, including Spotify. You can find Hellbent for Horror. That is my podcast. It's been going for 4 years now. We're continuing on, and it's a bit of fun. You can find me on Hellbent for Horror, that as a webpage, as well as on Facebook. Once again, Hellbent for Horror. The only variant is on Twitter. For some reason, Hellbent for Horror was taken, but not by me. And so I'm Hellbent Horror. And I should have put the 4 in there, but I didn't. So it's just Hellbent Horror. Same with Instagram, Hellbent for Horror. And if you are looking for we're actually going to be doing it live tonight. So by the time you're listening to this, it's going to already be dead. But it's probably going to be the swan song for a little bit for the Women in Horror Film Festival live show that I've been doing, which is basically a pirate radio station kind of thing where we're recreating what it's like to be at cons after hours. It's really what we're all missing. And so we decided to just have people on to talk about whatever they want to, as long as it's somewhat horror based. We've been doing that live for a couple months off of the Women in Horror Facebook page, Women in Horror Film Festival. You can look it up as WIHFF. And if you're looking for my book Screaming for Pleasure, you can find that on all of the major booksellers, but also independents. So I definitely wanted to make sure that the independents get a shout out on there. If you go to my webpage, Hellbent for Horror, I have a list of all the different indies that you can use as an avenue to get the book from. If you don't want to go to those really big guys that say all those nasty stuff about other places. And I think that's about it. Thank you.
Cool. Are they able to go to the Facebook page and watch old episodes?
Yes, you can watch old episodes on there. You can get a link to them. It's actually, I think, a little bit easier, weirdly enough, on Twitter. Twitter just has a better ability, because I have videos that I can play on Twitter because of the way that Facebook plays itself. It doesn't allow for anything that can be even remotely construed as copyright. So also another thing that I just did, if anybody's interested, I did a short film about suburbia on a live show, a virtual live show called Kevin Geeks Out. You can find kevingeeksout.com as a website, or on Facebook, Kevin Geeks Out. I was the last episode. It's 7 artists being asked to do 10-minute pieces on one subject, and ours was weird suburbia. So I do a whole piece on suburbia not being a actual location. It's more like Shangri-La or Camelot than it is a borough or a township, and how that's where our urban legends really come from. There's suburban legends. All of our sins are those haunted houses that are in every town. Whatever the problem is of your place, whatever horrors happened, that's the urban legends of your hometown, and they tell the story of your hometown. Anyway, that's there. You can take a look. It was fun to do.
Very nice. All right. Well, I guess that wraps it up for this week. So as always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we will see you next week here at thenecronama.com.
I'm your number one fan.